Hello students. So now let's move to the methods of measuring the price elasticity of demand. Okay, so the first one is the ratio of the percentage method. Okay, here the ratio method is developed by Professor Marshall, that is Alfred Marshall. According to this method, elasticity of demand is measured by dividing the percentage change in demand by the percentage change in price. Demand divided by price, and the percentage change is also known as arithmetic method. Okay, so you just remember, if the question comes as what is arithmetic method or what is known as arithmetic method, you have to write the answer of ratio of the percentage method. Okay, here the formula for this price elasticity is measured as percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. And how is it denoted? ED is equal to percentage, then the sign for change is the triangle, then Q, then percentage change in price. Mathematically, the formula can also be presented as ED is equal to change in quantity divided by quantity, then again divided by change in price divided by price. Therefore ED is equal to, and now you have to cross this multiplication, like change in quantity divided by quantity into, then here it will come multiplication P divided by change in price. Okay, where Q is the quantity demanded, triangle Q is the difference between the new quantity and the original quantity demanded, that is a change in quantity. P is equal to original price, and triangle P is difference between the new price and original price, means again change in price. Okay, and now I have given an example over here. Price in rupees 20 and 25 and quantity is 10 and 9. So the formula presented over here, change in quantity divided by quantity multiplied by price divided by change in price. So original price over here was rupees 20 and the new price is rupees 25, and change in price is rupees 5. The difference between these two prices, change in price, that is rupees 5, and original quantity is 10, the new quantity is 9, and the difference between them is 1. So that is why change in quantity will be 1 divided by 10, 1 divided by 10 multiplied by 20 divided by 5. The answer will give us 0.4, which is less than, okay, so ED is 0.4 is less than 1. It means this elasticity of demand is relatively inelastic. So if you have learned this in the previous lectures and in my previous videos, what is relatively inelastic demand? So this is less than 1, therefore it is relatively inelastic demand. Okay, so now let's move to the next thing, that is next is total expenditure. Okay, so total expenditure method. So this method was developed by Professor again Alfred Marshall. In this method, the total amount of expenditure before and after change is compared. Comparison is done. Here the total expenditure refers to the product of price and quantity demanded. Total expenditure is equal to price into quantity demanded. Okay, so remember this, price into quantity demanded. In this section, in this connection, Marshall has given the following proposition: relatively elastic demand. Relatively elastic demand is greater than 1 when, with a given change in price of a commodity, total outlay increases. Total outlay increases, elasticity of demand is greater than 1. And again in total expenditure, he has given another connection, that is unitary elastic demand. What is unitary? Unit is equal to 1. When price falls or rises, total outlay does not change or remain constant. Elasticity of demand is equal to 1. Okay, so remember this. And relatively inelastic demand. So there are three connections given: relatively inelastic demand, elastic demand, and unitary elastic demand. So the third one is relatively inelastic demand. So here ED is less than 1 when a price change, when with the given change in price of a commodity total outlay decreases, elasticity of demand is less than 1. So always remember this. Price in rupees ABC. So I have given different prices over here: 6, 5 for A customer, it's 6 and 5; for B it's 4 and 3; and for C 2 is 1. And the quantity demanded in units is when the price is high, the quantity is low, 10, 20, then it goes on increasing because the price has decreased. So total quantity, when we multiply 6 into 10 is 65, into 20 is 100. So here the total quantity or the total outlay is given, that is price into quantity. And here the elasticity of demand, if it's greater than 1, it's equal to 1 or less than 1. Okay, so that is it. So in case 1, where it's less than 1, original price is 6 units and the quantity is 5 per unit, demanded is 10 units. Therefore the total expenditure incurred is rupees how much? 60. When price falls to rupees 5, quantity demanded rises to 20 units. So just remember, when the price falls, the quantity is going to, demand is going to increase. The total expenditure incurred is rupees 100. In this case, the total outlay is greater than the original expenditure, hence at this elasticity is greater than 1. So here ED is greater than 1, that is relatively elastic demand is greater than 1. Okay, so in case B, so let's see what was the case B. Original price is rupees 4 per unit and the quantity demanded is 30. Therefore the total expenditure is 120, that is 4 into 30 is equal to 120. When price falls to 3 per unit, quantity demanded increases to 40 units. Total expenditure incurred is 120. In this case, outlay is same, equal to the original expenditure. Hence at this point elasticity is equal to 1, that is unitary elastic demand. Okay, so here it's equal to 1. And in case C, original price is 2 units and quantity is 50 units, therefore total expenditure is 100. When price falls to rupees 1, quantity demanded rises to 60 and total expenditure incurred is rupees 60, that is 1 into 60. In this case, total outlay is less than original expenditure, hence elasticity of demand is less than 1, that is relatively inelastic demand. So remember these 3 examples, you have to give the examples when the total expenditure is written. Okay, total expenditure method is asked in the question paper. Okay, the third one is point method or the geometric method. Professor Alfred Marshall has again developed another method to measure the elasticity of demand, which is known as the point or the geometric method. This ratio, the ratio method and the total outlay methods are enabled to measure elasticity of demand at a given point on the measure curve. Okay, they are unable to measure the elasticity, therefore this method is developed. Okay, and what this say, at any point on the demand curve, elasticity of demand with the help of the following formula. Point elasticity of demand, that is ED. The short form of elasticity of demand is ED. Okay, lower segment of demand curve below a given point L. L is a given point, and upper segment of demand curve above a given point, that is U. Demand curve may be either linear or non-linear as shown below. Okay, linear demand curve. When the demand curve is linear, that is a straight line, we extend the demand curve to meet the y-axis at A and x-axis at B. Okay, price elasticity of demand at x-axis is 0 and y-axis is infinite. Elasticity of demand will be different at each point. Okay, so this is what the linear demand curve states. Okay, and I have drawn a diagram over here, wherein on the x-axis we have the quantity demanded, on y we have the price, and here I have plotted the points in the linear demand curve, P, P1 and P2. Okay, and in P2 is greater than 1, P is equal to 1 and P1 is less than 1, and ED is equal to, ED over here is 0. Okay, and here it is infinite. At this point it is infinite. Okay, at point P, the point elasticity is measured as PB is equal to P is equal to PB divided by PA is equal to 4 divided by 4. So we have taken it as 4. Okay, elasticity as 4 is equal to 1. So therefore P is equal to 1 at this point. Okay, at the very middle point. Thus P is unitary elastic demand. When it's equal to 1, it's unitary elastic demand. At P1, the point elasticity is measured as P1 equal to P1B divided by P1A. P1A equal to 2 divided by 6 equal to 0.33, and here the demand is relatively inelastic because it's less than 1. Okay, understood? Then at point P2. Okay, so at P2, what is it at P2? The elasticity is measured as P2B divided by P2A equal to 6 divided by 3, which gives the answer as 3. So therefore elasticity is greater than 1. Okay, ED is greater than 1. And at point A, the point elasticity is infinite, is perfectly inelastic. At here is this point, it's perfectly elastic demand. And at point B, elasticity is 0, that is perfectly inelastic demand. So that was it for linear demand curve. Okay, so now let's move to the next, that is the non-linear demand curve. When the demand curve is non-linear, that is convex to the origin, to measure the price elasticity of demand, we have to draw a tangent AB touching the given point on the demand curve and extending it to meet y-axis at point A and x-axis at point B. Lower a segment of the tangent below a given point divided by upper segment of the tangent above a given point. This is lower tangent of the above a given point divided by upper segment of the tangent above a given point. So L divided by U, lower divided by upper. Okay, so A and B is there, O and B. Okay, if EB is equal to EA, that is elasticity EB equal to EA, then unitary elastic, because it's going to be equal. If EB is greater than EA, then ED is greater than 1, that is relatively elastic demand. But if EB is less than EA, then ED will be less than 1, and therefore it's relatively inelastic demand. So all these things are a bit confusing. Unless you revise everything twice, thrice, you will not be able to understand. So make sure you revise all these things again and again to understand better. And again, if you have not understood anything, do let me know in the comment section, so I can take this again in the next lecture. Okay, in the next video. Okay, so next comes the factor influencing. So that's it for the elasticity of demand, the formulas and everything. So now let's move to the theory, that is features influencing the elasticity of demand. It depends on the below factors. Nature of the commodity. By nature, we classify commodities as necessary, comforts, luxury. Demands for necessaries like food grains, medicine, textbook is relatively inelastic, and for luxury goods like cars, perfume, furniture is relatively elastic. So just remember that when it's relatively inelastic means more demand, and relatively elastic means less demand. Availability of substitute. Demand for commodity will be more elastic, means more demand if its substitutes are available, if close substitutes are available in the market. Example, lemon juice, sugarcane, etc. But commodities having no substitutes like salt, the demand will be inelastic. Always remember, where there is no demand, where there is less demand, okay, more demand is there, it will be relatively inelastic, and less, it will be relatively elastic. Okay, number of uses. Single use goods have a less elastic demand. Multi-use goods have more elastic demand, like coal to make electricity and everything, and again electricity for various purposes. Habits makes demand for certain goods relatively inelastic. Example is the addicted goods, drugs, etc. Durability. The demand for durable goods is relatively elastic. Furniture, washing machine, etc. Demand for perishable goods is inelastic. Example, milk and vegetables. Complementary goods. The demand for commodity which is used in conjunction with other commodities to satisfy single want is relatively inelastic. Example, a fall in price of mobile handsets may lead to rise in demand for SIM cards. Okay, so this is complementary goods depending on each other. Income of the consumer. Demand for goods is usually inelastic if the consumer has high income. Okay, and the demand pattern of very rich and extremely poor is rarely affected by significant changes in the price. Definitely, if the one who is rich, he will buy even if the price is high, and extremely poor, he will not buy even if the price falls down, because he doesn't have money. Okay, then comes the urgency of needs. Goods which are urgently needed will have relatively inelastic demand. Example, medicines. Anyhow you have to buy the medicines, even if the price increases, therefore the demand is relatively inelastic demand. Luxury goods which are less urgent have relatively elastic demand. Okay, remember all these things. Time period. Elasticity is always related to period of time. It varies with the length of the price. Generally speaking, longer the duration, greater will be the elasticity of demand and vice versa. This is because a consumer can change the consumption habits in the long run in favor of the cheaper substitutes of the commodities. Okay. So what comes next is the proportion of expenditure. If the proportion of expenditure in a person's income is small, the demand for the product is relatively inelastic. Example, newspaper. If the proportion of expenditure is large, the demand is relatively elastic. So even if the price of newspaper increases, decreases, there is no such because they are very cheap. So that is why proportion of expenditure, even if it increases, the demand is relatively elastic. Okay, so here I have given few determinants: nature and price elasticity. What is the availability factors? If it's abundant, then it's relatively elastic. If it's few, then it's relatively inelastic. Nature of commodity: if it is a necessary goods, is definitely relatively inelastic. Luxury, relatively elastic. Habits: if it's habituated, we need it every day, it's relatively inelastic. And if it's not habituated, relatively elastic. Time period: for a short run it is relatively inelastic, and for long run it's relatively elastic. Short run is relatively inelastic. Postponement of consumption: whether if it's the price is high, you can postpone it for a later date. Then postponement, relatively elastic, and if it is impossible to postpone, it's relatively inelastic. Number of uses: if it's several use, relatively elastic, and for specific it's relatively inelastic. Okay. Importance of elasticity of demand. So first, importance to the producer. Every producer has to decide the price of his product for which he has to sell it. For this purpose, elasticity of demand becomes important. If the demand for a product is relatively inelastic, he will fix up a higher price and vice versa. The concept of elasticity is useful to monopolists to the practice price discrimination. Okay. Then comes importance to the government. Taxation policy of the government is based on the concept of elasticity of demand. Those commodities whose demand is relatively inelastic will be taxed most, because it will not affect the demand much, and vice versa. Okay, it's important to the government, it's important to the producer. Then it comes important in price factor pricing. The concept of elasticity is useful in determination of factor prices. The factor of production for which demand is relatively inelastic can command a higher price as compared to those having elastic demand. Workers can ask for higher wages if the demand for the product produced by them is relatively inelastic. Then pricing is important of the elasticity in foreign trade. The concept of elasticity is useful to determine the terms and conditions in foreign trade. The countries importing commodities for such demand is relatively inelastic can raise their prices. Organization of petroleum, that is the OPEC, have increased the price of the several items. The concept is also useful in formulating the export and import policy of the country. So the price in the foreign trade is also important. Okay. Then comes last is the public utilities. In case of public utilities, railways, which have an inelastic demand, government can either subsidize or nationalize them to avoid the consumer exploitation. These are the public utilities. So that was it for elasticity of demand. So the chapter was very interesting but a bit difficult to understand few concepts. If you have not understood any concept, do let me know in the comment section so I can take it up again in the next video. Okay, so the most likely questions that I could extract from this chapter is distinguish between the relatively elastic demand and relatively inelastic demand, so you can get difference between any 5 of them. Okay, so you have to thoroughly understand all the 5 elastic demands, okay, and the types of demand. Okay, factors influencing the elasticity of demand. Then comes the outlay method of measuring the elasticity of demand. Okay, that is a geometric method, arithmetic method, all you have to explain them in detail. And the importance of elasticity of demand, how it affects the foreign trade, then the factor pricing, everything. And the elasticity, explain the elasticity of demand and types of elasticity of demand. Okay, so if you have any questions on this chapter, do let me know in the comments section, and do like, share and subscribe to my channel. So let's meet in the next video in the next chapter. Okay, till then, bye, thank you, have a nice day.